Hello everybody, Necromancy for Kids here with a video that I feel is needed to clear the air about some misconceptions and misinformation that's been going around a lot about the GOAT format community and the game itself. Before I start, I do want to say that this isn't blaming anyone specifically or being upset at anyone for believing these things, because even some of the misconceptions I'm going to talk about I actually had myself before I joined the community and before I started playing for an extended period of time. Even after like the first month, some of them I still believed myself, but I've since then learned otherwise. As for my qualifications for telling you this information, I am a community leader / moderator on the official GoFormat.com Discord. I'm also one of the server managers on the official GoFormat Europe Discord, and I've been playing GoFormat since 2019. I used to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Since probably 2004 until 2010, and then I came back in 2012 till 2014, and I tried to come back in 2019, but I wasn't really enjoying it, so I tried out GOAT format, and since 2019 I've been very involved, both casually and competitively. I've been in a number of tournaments, and I haven't got top 8, but I have got 9th place, and I've been the TO for a number of GOAT format tournaments. Even just recently, I was the TO for a 32-person tournament that we had, and before that, I also did the 3v3 GOAT tournament, which had 84 participants. But there's tournaments that we've had that have had more. I just haven't been part of those specific tournaments. Now that all of that's out of the way, I can begin to tell you about some of these misconceptions. The first misconception that I'd like to get out of the way is that the name GOAT format is not an acronym for greatest of all time format. It's actually named after Scapegoat, which was used in the GOAT control deck that was most prevalent at the time that it was named. Most people that play the format don't actually think that it's the most skilled or even the greatest format of all time, and not even the people that are in charge of the format, such as myself or pretty much anyone that I've seen that's a moderator or an admin on the Discord. Even a majority of people that I've talked to in general playing the format, people sometimes just like to call it greatest of all time format because, you know, it just fits with the name and they're having fun and they're excited about it. And there's nothing wrong with having some fun and being excited, but the majority of players don't actually believe that it's the most skilled format or it really is the quote-unquote greatest of all time. And that leads into my second misconception that a lot of people have, which is that GOAT format players all dislike current format. That's one of the major things that comes up in any discussion about GOAT format players or the format in general. But even a lot of the staff members involved in keeping GOAT format alive still play current format Yu-Gi-Oh!, such as Moxie's, Cameron, Mascus, and I know that there's a ton more. I'd even seen in the Discord somewhat recently, before making this video, someone's like, you know, I think I'm in the minority, but I also play current format. And a lot of people are like, yeah, me too. It's just another form of Yu-Gi-Oh! Some people play GOAT format as their primary format of choice. Some people use it as their only format. Some people only come back to GOAT format when they're feeling kind of down on current format, like when there's a particularly bad meta going on currently, because GOAT format, the card pool and the rules for the format never change, so you can always go back and expect not the same exact experience, but you're going to be able to play the same type of game as you had before. And that leads me into another misconception of the game, which is that GOAT format players all play mirror matches. I mentioned earlier that at the time that it was named GOAT format, it was because of the main deck at the time, GOAT Control, which was named because it used Scapegoat. A lot of people believe, and even I believed before I actually started playing the game, that everyone just plays GOAT Control and it's the best deck that you could possibly play in the format. But the truth of the matter is that a lot of people, majority of people, don't even touch or have never played a GOAT Control deck in GOAT format. Not to say that it is the worst deck, because some people do still play it and it has top tournaments still, but that is not the end-all be-all deck. And at the same time though, some people believe that the meta is solved, or that even if it's not all GOAT Control decks, everyone still plays the same decks over and over and over again. And while of course there are people that play the same sort of decks as each other sometimes, there are a lot of different kind of decks in the format. There's warrior decks, there's Chaos Turbo, there's Chaos Control, there's GOAT Control, there's regular warriors, there's Earth Beatdown, there's Reasoning Gate Turbo, Stein Gate, Panda Burn, Cat Burn, Bazoo, Chaos Return, Chaos Recruiter, Zombies, Zombie Burn, Cold Wave Monarch decks. These are all decks that have done relatively well or top tournaments very recently in the format within the last year. And almost every tournament, you're going to see some kind of deck that people haven't really seen before, or that uses a tech that people haven't really used before, or even in some cases, like we have players such as Alephia and Delinquent that come out with decks that everyone is just like, whoa, you can actually do this in Go format, and they win tournaments with it. The card pool remains the same, and the ban list remains the same, but people's card choices and techs and even deck choices for what's going to be the best in that tournament is always changing. Another misconception on that same sort of vein is that there's a number of people that believe that the best deck in GOAT format is FTK decks, namely library decks and empty jar decks. And while those decks do exist in the format and they can definitely win, they haven't really done anything in any tournaments as of late besides the 3v3 tournament on the European server. Part of that is because there's such a large stigma in the community that people don't really want to play them, and a lot of people think they're boring, so they don't want to play them, but also they aren't as good as people actually believe that they are. Or at least, as far as we know, the people that play the format can't play them as well as people believe them to be able to play. Because we even had someone who was offering $100+ to top ladder using FTK decks, and all of the participants were completely unable to get anywhere to the top. So it goes to show that the deck isn't consistent enough, as far as we know, to actually be a #1 contender. And that brings me to the next misconception I wanted to talk about, which is that the power spells in Go format cause it to become a pure luck format. And before I get into the details on that specifically, I want to clarify that in Go format, we don't have cards like Dark Hole, Raigeki, Monster Reborn, Painful Choice, or Forceful Sentry, which for some reason I have seen people make arguments that these cards are overpowered in Go format, and that's why they hate the format, but they're not actually legal to play. You can always check the ban list for Go format on the official goformat.com website, which I'll link relevant things in the description and in the comments as well. The cards that people mostly talk about are Delinquent Duo, Pot of Greed, and Graceful Charity. To a lesser extent, they also talk about Snatch Steal and Last Will, and a few cards like that. I've even seen some people complain about Heavy Storm in GOAT format, I'm just going to say that those ladder cards aren't nearly as much of a problem in the format as people think that they are, and they're a lot easier to play around than other cards. Specifically though, I'd like to talk about the main ones people complain about, which are Delinquent Duo, Pot of Greed, and Graceful Charity. First of all, I have made a video about Pot of Greed and why I think that's actually a good card for GOAT format. Not as much Graceful Charity. Pot of Greed, I'll summarize as saying it is poor card design for it to be a card that draws 2 cards in a game that has no resources or limit on how many cards you can activate in a turn. But it does act as a way for a player to come back from a bad situation, and it enables certain cards to shine in the format and in the game that otherwise wouldn't be able to. Graceful Charity is generally considered stronger than Pot of Greed because you get to filter through 3 cards rather than 2, and you get to fill your graveyard, which isn't as powerful in GOAT format as, say, current Yu-Gi-Oh!, but it still has its advantages, like with zombies and with Chaos, which is a very prevalent deck. Graceful Charity requires a bit more forethought when you activate it than people think, because if you're having to ditch good cards, you no longer have access to those for the rest of the game. And in GOAT format, the games can go on for a pretty long time. I mean, I've had matches that last 3 hours even though that's not normal, but on average I'd say about an hour for a 3-game match. And that's not just purely thinking. Of course, there's a lot of turns in there, even against decks that usually are pretty aggressive. These cards sort of act like a critical hit in the game, which people do dislike critical hits in games, but they allow for the weaker decks to have a chance to potentially gain an advantage and win over the stronger ones. And like I said, they allow a player to potentially come back from a bad defeat. And the opponent activating one of these cards doesn't really end the game right then and there. What it actually does is just mean they're at the advantage for now, but literally the next turn you could draw Pot of Greed or Graceful Charity for your turn, and then you're on essentially, again, even ground. As for Delinquent Duo, I will say that it is one of the most hated cards in the format by most people who play the format. Unlike Pot of Greed and Graceful Charity, it's a negative fun card in that one player is extremely upset that it was activated, versus Pot of Greed and Graceful Charity where you're like, oh dang, my opponent got to draw 2 cards, but at least I can use my cards to fight back. And Delinquent Duo, you're having your opponent touch your cards and get rid of them so you can play the game less. And a lot of people hate it, but at the same time, as you play the game, you begin to learn more and more that the card isn't always usable, unlike Pot of Greed and Graceful Charity, because you have to pay 1,000 life points and your opponent has to have 2 cards at least in hand for it to get a plus. And sometimes your opponent has cards in their hand that completely mitigate the advantage, like Sinister Serpent or Night Assailant, or they activated Thunder Dragon on their previous turns. Now they have 2 cards that they can just ditch, and you didn't really gain much when you activated Delinquent Duo. And again, this isn't to say that the card isn't powerful, because it can potentially, it has the potential to end a game immediately after it's activated, essentially. But a lot of players that play GO format for a month or 2, more than just a couple of games, begin to accept its existence in the format and realize one of the biggest things about it, which is it stops combo decks from completely taking over. Of course, not just by itself, but it's a really big contributor, because a combo deck like an FTK deck or a cat deck or something like that is going to need all the cards they can to win the game. And if you get rid of one of their key pieces or 2 cards out of their hand, it's quite possible that they won't be able to combo off. And a lot of people complain about combo decks. In fact, I would say that people probably complain more about combo decks than they do about Delinquent Duo. The final 2 misconceptions I'd like to talk about are less prevalent, but that I think are important to talk about when we speak of the Go format community as a whole. Some people believe that Go format is only played online or only played in the US, which is definitely incorrect. First, on the online aspect, there are locals all over the US and pretty much every state. I know that there are locals in my state, in Florida, in California, in New York, and all over the place. We actually have a local tournament finder where people can find tournaments in their local area, and it has a whole ton of different submissions. They're user submitted, so we don't have actually that many, but you'd be surprised just where you might be able to find some local GOAT tournaments. Which brings me to the fact that GOAT format is a global format. Especially besides the US, there is a very large community in Italy. You can even check out for yourself through the channel GOAT Community Italia, where they hold very large tournaments very frequently. I think they have over 100 people attending sometimes. And you can check out the Go Format Europe Discord, which has over 1,000 people on the server, although some of those, such as myself, aren't actually from Europe, but there is a large number, including people from the UK and Germany and Japan, Mexico, Canada, Vietnam, Saudi Arabia, Australia, New Zealand, Portugal, Spain, and a whole lot of other places. It's actually amazing how large and widespread the Go format community is, and it's one of the reasons that I love the community so much, because it's so varied and people of all sorts of lifestyles and different nationalities and different cultures that are included in it, which of course is also true of regular Yu-Gi-Oh! It really shouldn't come as a surprise that these people exist. We're part of the internet, and we're able to be part of local communities, even with these local tournaments that people put on, sometimes even without knowing about the existence of the official GoFormat.com website or the official GoFormat.com Discord, or even about Dueling Book. Some people just hear about it from word of mouth. With all of that said, hopefully I've cleared up some of the misconceptions that you might have had, or that maybe a friend that you're sending this video might have had about the format. And there probably are some others that people might still hold, but there's nothing wrong with disliking Go format or current format or any game, as long as you're not a jerk about it. There's no reason that anyone who dislikes current format or dislikes Go format needs to fight about it. It's just a game at the end of the day, and we don't really gain anything from yelling at each other about any of it. Thank you very much for listening to this. I know I rambled in a couple of places, but I think I got my point across, hopefully, and I hope you all have a great day. Take care.